There are periods in life where being alone isn't failure or punishment. And more importantly, it's not something that needs to be fixed. A lot of the time, rather, it's actually necessary to be alone. Necessary in the same way rest is necessary after injury. In the same way silence is necessary after too much noise. In the same way distance is required to see something clearly sometimes. Most of us don't end up alone because we are incapable of connection, right? We end up alone because at some point we lose faith in ourselves. And this losing of faith happens very, very quietly. We stop trusting our instincts. We start outsourcing our sense of direction to other people. We begin needing reassurance with everything that comes our way. And without noticing, we start using relationships, romantic or platonic, as a way to feel anchored. And the very thing that leads this is the mere fact that those people are there with you. Not because those people are right for you. And yes, there is a difference. You see, being alone becomes crucial, necessary, when the presence of others starts to distort your relationship with yourself. When you start noticing that your mood depends on who's around you. When your sense of worth shifts based on whether someone replies. When you stay in certain conversations, certain friendships, certain dynamics in general that drain you simply because the alternative feels empty and alone, and you don't want to be alone. That emptiness is usually what people are running from. But it's not the emptiness that's the enemy. It's, again, ironically, it's the avoidance of that solitude. Because emptiness and solitude is where you hear yourself again. At first, it doesn't feel noble or clarifying. It feels like longing. It feels like reaching for your phone and stopping halfway. It feels like wanting to reach out to someone you already know isn't right for you. And it's important to understand that this is not because they are bad people or because something bad happened to you because of them or whatever it may be. It's actually because the version of you that exists around them is not the version of yourself that you respect. And it's uncomfortable to admit. Sometimes the people we miss aren't the people we need. They're just familiar. That's why we want them. Familiar voices, patterns, familiar ways of not being alone. And letting go of that familiarity feels like loss, even when you know it is the right thing to do. That is why enduring loneliness, enduring solitude is a skill. It's not about pretending you don't want connection. It's about resisting the urge to fill that space with the wrong people just to avoid sitting with yourself. See what I'm saying? It's the trade that makes it not worth it. It's not necessarily the solitude itself or the people themselves. Because every time you do that, every time you feel emptiness and loneliness with people that are not necessarily good for you, basically what you're doing is you're reinforcing the idea that you can't stand on your own. Think about this. And over time, that belief becomes expensive. Like anything else in life, you keep feeding something for long enough and it becomes more powerful, more seemingly powerful than something you can tame, you can control. Even if it is something that you technically created, you start compromising your values to keep people close. You tolerate dynamics that quietly kind of erode your self-respect. You stay longer than you should, waiting for something to feel right again. But it doesn't. That's the thing, it never does. Being alone, when chosen deliberately, more emphasis on the when chosen deliberately, is an act of self-trust more than anything else. If you can say, I don't need constant proximity to survive. I can sit with uncertainty. I can sit by myself and just be bored. When you can say that you can let discomfort exist without immediately, desperately trying to solve it, that is not weakness. That is stability. That is being comfortable with yourself. And there is a specific kind of strength that forms when you endure longing without acting on it. When you miss someone and still don't reach out, when you feel the pull of familiarity and choose restraint instead, when you accept that wanting someone doesn't automatically mean that they belong in your life, this applies everywhere, not just romantically. Friendships, creative partnerships, social circles, entire environments. You see, sometimes growth requires stepping away from the people who feel like home, because the home that they represent is no longer the home that fits who you are becoming. And yes, that is painful, but pain isn't always a signal to turn back. Sometimes it's just the cost of honesty. Sometimes it's just what you need. So you see, when you've been alone long enough, something very subtle happens. Your internal voice gets louder. Your reactions slow down. And you stop performing yourself to others. You begin noticing what you actually like and dislike. And that is where faith in yourself is rebuilt. Once you know that, truly know it, your standards change. You stop chasing connection. You stop fearing silence. You stop mistaking availability for compatibility. And from that place, relationships become choices rather than lifeline. You invite people in because they add clarity, not because they prevent collapse, not because you absolutely can't survive without them. And that is the difference between companionship and dependency, healthy and unhealthy. So if you're alone right now, if you're resisting the urge to keep someone close who isn't right, if you're sitting with the discomfort of missing people you had to leave behind, you're not behind, you're not broken. You're simply just doing something that a lot of people avoid. You're rebuilding trust with yourself. And obviously, it's gonna be a quiet process. A lonely one. But it is also the foundation to every meaningful connection you will ever have. Why is that? It's because the people who eventually belong in your life won't need you to abandon yourself to keep them. You see what I'm saying? You won't need them to make yourself feel whole again. You will consciously walk into a relationship not because of selfish reasons, but because you genuinely love that person, whether it be romantic or platonic or whatever. You genuinely care about that person, not because you cannot survive if that person didn't exist. I would like to end with a verse from the Bible. Psalm chapter 23, verse 4. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. You have an amazing day. I'm rooting for you.